So I mentioned a little bit back in the previous episode that Druck doesn't completely drop all of like the little hints that they have put in for Matteo's depression / anxiety. And I think that this clip in particular is the piece of evidence that a lot of people, including myself, point to when we're trying to prove that. So throughout this clip, Matteo is pretty quiet, and you could absolutely argue against the fact that he looks sad. I don't even really know if he looks sad or if he's acting sad, but I don't think you can argue with the fact that he looks tired. He looks drained. I think that's like the main thing here. We could debate about, his happiness, but tiredness, I don't know about that. I think that's pretty easy to see. And his entire demeanor, especially in like the first half of this clip, looks very much like Matteo from like episode 1 on the surface level. And what I mean by that is that there's like slouching, he's kind of like curled up a little bit on the couch, he's not facing the rest of the guys, he doesn't really say much, he's not showing a lot of emotion on his face, just stuff like that we saw him do a lot in the beginning of this season. So on the surface, it looks like we're kind of back to episode 1, episode 2 Matteo, right? And the coloring of this clip is also pretty cold, which is a stark contrast to the previous 2 clips, which were all about warmth. And I think that Matteo's low energy combined with that coloring could be Druck kind of reminding us that everything isn't suddenly like happiness and rainbows and unicorns just because David and Matteo are together. And for that, I say thank you. Thank you, Druck. Thank you for not just like completely dropping all of Matteo's unhappiness and most likely mental disorders. If they weren't gonna really resolve the mental illnesses that they coded into Matteo's character, I'm glad that they at least showed us that Matteo still has some quieter, maybe even sadder days, and that he's not just fixed because he's with David. Still wish that we could have actually like had a storyline with his mental health getting resolved or at least canonized, but whatever. If this is all we're gonna get, then I'm glad it exists. I do think this sudden drop of energy makes a lot of sense because Matteo is introverted. Even if you don't think he's like depressed at all, I think you can absolutely still attribute this energy drop to the introversion aspect because he's had a long fucking week. Specifically, he's had a very emotionally draining weekend, right? He was with David the entire weekend, pretty much. And like a lot of things happened, right? A lot happened, and a lot that drained his energy stores. He really hasn't had many chances to just be alone and recharge in the past couple of days. And I do think it's very important to note that even though he is absolutely drained during this clip and during this conversation, he is still trying to be part of it. And I think that's where you can't say that this is a regression of Matteo's character. On the surface level, yes, this does look like episode 1 Matteo. But he still tries to be part of this. He still tries to use what little energy he does have for good and to be an active part of this conversation. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this near the end of the clip. But yeah, I think that's really, really important because even though this looks kind of bad, he's still trying here. And I think it's really interesting to see our main character being so low energy. And I really appreciate that Druck let Matteo be an introvert throughout the entire season. They didn't try to convince us that he was all of a sudden an extrovert and that he was all of a sudden like super energetic all the time. We see Matteo grow more active and generally happier throughout the season, but he's still introverted. And I appreciate that on like a very deep level. So yeah, like this clip really just starts out and kind of like smacks you down immediately. Like everything just looks and feels very melancholic, dampened, I think is a good word for it. The guys even say that Jonas's song sounds kind of sad, and then Abdi is sad because of Sam. We can see immediately that Matteo doesn't have a lot of energy, which definitely translates into the tone because we are in Matteo's POV, so it does make sense why all of a sudden, like, This clip feels like literally low energy because Matteo is. And honestly, this very stark tone shift coming off of the previous two clips always is a little bit off-putting to me, but I do think that this clip is still, like, honestly one of my favorites despite that, because of Carlos and Abdi. Like, this clip is fucking brilliant. And even if it is a little bit like, oh shit, this is completely different, and that is a little jarring at first, I do still, like I said before, I appreciate the fact that this clip is showcasing the fact that Matteo is still an introvert. And I think this episode in general does a great job of showing how Matteo is now active in his life. He is active in his relationships. He cares to be part of things. He cares to be present in things. And he still maintains his natural disposition as an introvert. And as an introvert myself, love that. So yeah, like I said before, he definitely does still like say some things, which are signals to me of the fact that he does still want to be a part of this conversation. He is trying. He's not just, you know, feeling low energy and therefore not trying at all, not putting any effort in at all. He's definitely still listening. You can see him like looking at people when he's talking, which might seem like nothing, but I feel like a lot of the time in the first half of the season, when the boys were talking, Matteo would just like zone out and just not even bother to listen to them because he was just like so passive and everything. But here, he's looking at Carlos when he's talking, he's looking at Abdi, he speaks when he's spoken to, which is probably all he has the energy to do, and that's fine, I think. He doesn't drive any part of this conversation, but he's definitely still a part of it. He's not being like standoffish, he doesn't seem like bitter or like he doesn't want to be there. So I think all of those things point to the fact that Matteo has grown, but he is still an introvert. How many times am I going to say introvert? How many times have I already said it? And then I love how Matteo falls into David's shoulder. Like, he falls into that hug because of how like low energy he is right now. He needs this like physical closeness and affection from David, and David like happily obliges without like any questions. He's like, yeah, I will absolutely hug you and comfort you right now. And I'm also pretty sure, I'm like 90% sure that Matteo is a little bit taller than David. But here, because of how he's slouching, David actually looks taller, which I just really like. I think that's a nice detail. And then another detail, which could definitely just be part of my imagination, I think Matteo lifts David here a little bit when they hug. Or if he doesn't lift him, he at least hugs him so tight that it shifts the weight distribution to make it seem like he lifts him. And either way, that is fucking adorable and my heart hurts. Jesus. Fucking ouch, dude. Fucking ouch. And then once David shows up, the energy does get like marginally lighter, which is nice. And I feel like I could talk about this imagery of Matteo and David sitting like this for hours, but I'm going to try to keep it brief for your sake and for mine. But we see a lot of physical closeness between David and Matteo in this episode. They are together in every single clip in this episode. And in a lot of these clips, in all of these clips, we see them touching in some way. They are that couple, right? They're immediately that couple. Whether it's Matteo leaning on David, Matteo holding David, David leaning on Matteo, holding hands, whatever, anything, all of it, they're gonna do it. And this specific imagery with Matteo leaning on David like this and David like putting one arm over his middle in kind of a protective way, I feel like, I just love it, and I think it's a really beautiful symbolism because Matteo's tired here, and I think in general he's kind of a tired, quiet person. And when you combine a disposition like that with a deep-seated craving for physical affection, you get someone who leans on their boyfriend quite often, right? I think that's just a natural progression of those two elements of Matteo's character coming together really nicely. And I also love how they just automatically fall into this positioning. I know I'm not dumb, like I know it's movie magic, I know that they rehearsed this, but I don't know, they could have made it seem like it was a little bit more awkward, especially considering they are very new to being in a relationship. Like, they could have taken the time to make it seem a little bit more awkward, but they didn't. David and Matteo just, like, fall into this. They are in sync with one another. They just know what the other wants and needs in this moment. And like I said, Matteo and David almost immediately established themselves as that couple. And I think that that reputation is a perfect way to show their growth because, you know, remember how both of them used to physically distance themselves, not only from each other, but from everyone else as well. But I think it could also be a physical representation of their, like, unspoken connection and their more subtle displays of protection and comfort towards one another. I feel like what goes unsaid a lot of the time between David and Matteo can be explicitly seen through these physical acts of love. And that really is, like, their love language, is physical touch. And I just love it. I really feel like I could write an essay about physicality in this season. Honestly, even just in this episode, because there's so much of it. And going along with that idea of this physicality being a function of their support for one another, I think that this positioning here is just as much of a comfort for David as it is for Matteo. Because this is David's first, like, real encounter with the boy squad, and the imagery of using Matteo as a bit of a human shield, or like a buffer between himself and the guys, is just a really, really cool thing to imagine. I don't know, that's how I kind of see it. I see it as, yeah, Matteo is getting comfort from this, because he gets to lean on David, and he kind of gets to take a little bit of the weight off of himself. But I feel like also David is getting some comfort from this as well. During this first meeting with the guys, he gets to hold his boyfriend and feel that comfort as well, and be a little protected by him. I don't know. I think it's cool. And whether it's because of how they're sitting, or because David is just, like, so fucking brave, he very quickly integrates with the boy squad. And I feel like this is in parallel to the previous clip, in which Matteo was the one who was being welcomed and assimilated into this foreign environment with Laura. They've now both been integrated into each other's realities, which is a huge deal considering how their relationship used to be very secretive and fantastical. Their relationship itself was scared of reality, right? They started out playing pretend and hiding from people, but now they are in each other's realities. Matteo is a part of the Schreibner family, and David is part of Matteo's friend group. So after the funniest line in any Scum universe ever, Matteo shows once again that although he is drained, he is still a part of this fucking ridiculous conversation, and he wants to, you know, add his 2 cents now that he has a little bit of the energy to do so. And then there's even more mirroring with David and Matteo sighing and looking away from Abdi at the exact same time. And I kind of wrap up this clip and hit home what I started out saying. I think there is a small arc that Matteo's energy goes through throughout this clip. You know, he's not just completely low energy the entire time. There are moments when he jumps in, and there are moments when he steps back. And I'm going to take that as evidence that, yes, Matteo is doing better, he is generally happier, but everything isn't perfect, and he is still going to have these more low energy days, and that's okay. That's just his character. That's who he is. He engages in this conversation when he's able to, when he can kind of use the humor of it to his advantage, and then he lets himself fall back into his tiredness during the other moments when he realizes he can kind of just sit back and listen and react non-verbally. And I think that's great. I think the way that Matteo uses his low energy effectively and efficiently shows growth from episode 1 Matteo. Because episode 1 Matteo wouldn't have even tried. Like I said before, he would have realized that he has little to no energy and would have just been like, fuck it. Okay, whatever. I'm not even gonna try to like use what little energy I do have in an effective way to still be active here. I'm just gonna give up and I'm just gonna be passive and I'm not even going to engage at all. Episode 10 Matteo does not do that. Even though he doesn't have a lot of energy, he still tries. And that is such a huge difference, and it still shows a lot of growth for him. So I really like how in this clip we can see Matteo showing his support for David in a variety of ways. He starts out by using humor, and then he switches to a pretty direct way of literally saying, like, you got this, I'm gonna be right here. And then, of course, in true Matteo and David fashion, he also uses some nonverbal physical gestures in order to try to make David feel more comfortable. And I really love it. It just shows once again how loving Matteo is. I think he has so much love to give, and he finally gets to give it to someone. And I think it's also really interesting how as soon as David leaves, Matteo lets himself kind of decompress and really like lay his body on the counter. And he fiddles with the plant, which I've mentioned a billion times. I'm not going to go over all the times that he does that. I feel like I did that in the last episode. But that could be, you know, an expression of nerves. It could be like he's already bored. It's probably both, I think. The way that I read him, like, immediately slouching and finding something to play with as soon as David is gone, I feel like that is a good physical representation of the fact that Matteo is still kind of low on energy, and he's using whatever he has to support David. And that once David is gone, he's kind of just gonna let himself slouch and like lay on the counter. He's trying to conserve the rest of that energy for when David comes back out, either to, you know, comfort him because something went wrong, or to, you know, be excited with him because something went well. And then you can see more of Matteo's nerves because he just cannot remain in the same place for more than like 5 seconds. Within this like 1 30-second interval, he goes from standing to completely slouching over the counter to standing again to sitting to standing to leaning back onto the counter once Jonas comes in. And then we have more sharing of food as a symbol of family and connection. And I like how it is like one donut that they're sharing, that they're like taking pieces off. I think that's an even cooler way to symbolize that connection and that support. And I've mentioned mirroring between David and Matteo throughout this episode, but this mirroring here between Matteo and Jonas is insane. So just watch their head movements during and right after the secretary shushes them, and try to tell me that they're not platonic soulmates.
Shh. Ganz nett hier.
That is probably like the most intense moment of mirroring in this episode, and it's not even between Matteo and David. So here you can see Matteo being confused about how many people are showing up to support him and David. And I did talk about how in the last episode, he does have this like epiphany that, oh shit, people care about me, people care about David, this is like our shared support system. And going with that, you could kind of see this and be like, wait, didn't he already have this epiphany? Why is he confused that people are coming in to support him? He knows he has a support system. But I think it's really realistic for Matteo as a character to need like more reminders of the fact that he does have this support system, that it's not just gonna abandon him when it's like less trendy to do so. I think in Matteo's mind, it's kind of logical to think that he could assume that people might have just been rallying behind David to get like some woke points or something, and that they wouldn't really take his advice about being there for David and not making it about them. If that's what he assumed, which honestly is not a crazy thing to assume, especially from Kiki, I think it makes sense for him to be a little bit surprised here. He's like, oh shit, that wasn't just a fluke. They actually care about David. They weren't just doing it to seem like they weren't transphobic or anything like that. They actually care about him, and they actually care about me. And I actually like that. I like that he has to be reminded again that, yeah, we still care about you, Matteo. We still care about David. And then as soon as David gets back into the waiting room, we see Matteo lean his head on him. And just like in the previous clip, I think this moment of physicality is just as much to comfort David as it is to comfort Matteo. I think you could see Matteo leaning on David here as a way for him to kind of ground David and be like, hey, it's all good. I got you. I have you. I'm here for you no matter what. And also, his left arm is like around David and on his back, and it's kind of balled into a fist, which to me signals like, don't fuck with my boyfriend. I don't think Matteo is a very aggressive person, but that gesture to me and that physicality to me screams like protectiveness. And it totally fits in line with how everyone else is treating the gym teacher right now. They're like, if you fuck with David, we will kill you. So yeah, I feel like even though Matteo loves leaning on David and he's gonna do it anyway, I feel like this could also be a subtle way, once again, for Matteo to show some extra support for David. I could just go on and on and on about how much I love that. And also how proud Matteo is when Amira doesn't let the gym teacher pass. Same. So that's all I have to say for this part. I will see y'all to finish up the episode in the next part. I can't believe there's only one video left. I'll see you then. Thank you so much for watching.